Well, get prepared for the tidal wave, folks, because there's a far right, or rather here, a hard right tidal wave about to hit Europe, according to Gordon Brown. And I'm Granniopteryx. So that's what Gordon Brown thinks. It will only make the economic crisis worse, as if the Labour Party has done such a good job of managing the country. Yeah, near zero growth has crushed living standards, sending voters to populist demagogues, but they have no solutions to offer. Now, I did mention in a previous video that Peter Whittle, talking to the New Culture Forum conference, went through a list of things that we have to do to restore what we see as a country to be proud of. But in many ways, it was like somebody telling a child a comforting fairy tale. Because it's all very well saying we have to teach British history in schools, a history of which we can be proud. But when the teachers refuse to do it, or having been given a curriculum, subvert it, unless you've got some sort of spy in every classroom and a sort of Stasi keeping an eye on what they're saying, you're not going to be able to get them to do that. And that's a problem. That's what I mean by comforting fairy tales. But that's a separate thing. I'm just pointing that out. It's not like the right have no solutions. It's that the right have to fight the hard left in order to get what they see as the right path, to get to what they see as the right path for our countries. And unfortunately, the hard left have wormed their way into the civil service, the education establishments, even the arts establishments of nearly all of these countries. And how we're going to deal with that, I really can't say. But I'm just pointing that out. Now, he also says the rightward shift is a Western, not just a European phenomenon, with Trump advocating a far more aggressive protectionist and nationalist agenda. But Europe stands out from the US in one important respect. While the US economy roars forward, even if the average American voter does not feel the full benefits, Europe, and especially its industrial engine room, Germany, continues to suffer from near zero growth and stagnation in terms of living standards. Because what's happening is we are spending our money on social programs. And I have made this comment before. Sounds heartless, but we can't afford most of them. And America is not that kind to its people. In America, if you lose your job, you lose medical insurance as well in many cases. So people hang on to their jobs, as mean and as unpleasant as those jobs may be. Medical insurance for themselves and their families trumps everything. In Britain, you just throw up the job, you've still got the medical insurance, it is your right. So it means there are many places in Britain where generations of people have not had a job. They're living at pretty low standards, but they can scrape along on the state. So this is the Gordon Brown view of it, but nobody on the left is considering the social aspects of this, the psychological aspects. When I was in a Glasgow railway station, there are two, I don't remember which one it was, but I was, more or less, I got chatting with an old soldier. He wasn't that old, but he was mostly drunk. And he was intensely proud of the service he gave to the United Kingdom. He was no Scottish nationalist. Though he was probably living in very reduced circumstances. but he was proud of the United Kingdom. He'd fought for them. And now, having come out of the army, as often happens, people who get along well in the army don't get along that well in civilian life. A good deal of the time, obviously, not all. He was proud of this country, and people like Gordon Brown and his government, you know, his Tony Blair government, they wanted to stop us from being proud of our country. We were going to be Europeans. We were going to be subsumed into a greater whole. And they weren't thinking that people need to be proud of where they are. And Victorian people, many of them, most of them, lived in the most appalling circumstances. They were still proud of being British. They weren't thinking, oh, well, I'm not going to do as well as my parents, so that means the country is shit. They were thinking, well, yeah, that's the way it's panned out for me, but the country is still great. Now, you Americans still have this feeling. But in Britain, governments like the Blair government, and even the Conservatives, because they've gone daft left as well, they have stopped us feeling proud of our country without realising that when things don't go well, then people abandon the idea of being part of a community. During the Second World War, people were living in pretty awful circumstances a lot of the time. You couldn't get this, you couldn't get that. My mother told me once she managed to get a kettle. They weren't making kettles, you know, all the metalworks were making ships and planes and things. And she managed to get hold of a kettle, and she was sitting on the bus, and there were people crowding round her saying, where did you get that kettle? That was the state of Britain during the Second World War. And even though those people at that time were not doing as well as their Victorian parents, they were still so proud of being British, of fighting a good fight, of doing a good thing, a just thing, of living in a cohesive society, that it didn't matter that they weren't doing as well as their parents. And even through the 60s, you had this feeling, but then it started to disintegrate with more and more socialism telling us everything in this country's history was rubbish. Everything was bad. And this is not a society we can be proud of. And people like Gordon Brown don't seem to realise that that's the important thing. And the near zero growth, that's not the point. And Germany as well, it's the same thing. I'm talking about Britain, but in many European countries, there is the same problem. So he refers to ultra-nationalist demagogues, and in many cases, they're just people who want to recapture our family of nationhood. And when I saw those mounted police going into a crowd of people celebrating St. George's Day, not rioting, but not criticising, not making a fuss, just celebrating British nationhood with the British patron saint. And there were the police running horses into them. Stop that. Stop that at once. How dare you be proud of your country? That's where the problem lies, not in the economic situation. Not at all. And people like that do not understand that simple fact. And that's because they're socialists. There's a basket of attitudes that go with socialism, and one of them is let's tear our country apart because it wasn't socialist before. And there'll be a bright future once the socialist utopia has been established, which of course is chasing rainbows. So there's this constant jam tomorrow sort of attitude. Well, people don't fall for that anymore. Okay, well, till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the granniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.